Chapter 29 Fallen Savior June 30th, 2086 Crater Lake, Oregon. Setla, Corder, Maui, and Kingi were too stunned to move. They needed more time to process the sudden death of Nainu, but Erin Hayat and her progeny lackeys were not going to let them have it. Hayat heard the commotion and was now throwing herself against the trick mirror. There was a loud smashing noise as the cult leader fell backwards into her own acolytes, unable to figure out the mirror's secret. Varian sprang to their feet and yelled, "Everyone through the door!" The Stormbreakers made a break for the exit. Varian paused just long enough to grab Nainu's body and sling it across their shoulders. Then he, or she, charged through the door of the final chamber while Kingi slammed it shut behind them. A warm breeze lifted Varian's hair, and they had to blink as their eyes watered from the intense sunlight. Wait, sunlight? Varian, Corder, Kingi, Setla, and Maui were standing on the shores of a tropical island. Blue seawater crashed onto pristine, sandy beaches, while colorful birds fluttered between trees. A wooden dock extended into the water, and above it was a great red sign that declared, "Aloha! Welcome to Kauai Island." Varian's jaw dropped. It took all of her, or his, effort to avoid dropping Nainu's corpse. "Kauai," he or she said. "This is close to the island where I live." Setla looked around, confused. "Are we in your home, Varian?" he asked. We're close by," Varian said. "Oahu and Kauai are part of the Hawaiian island chain, out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean." Now that Varian knew where they were, they looked around some more and positively identified the team's location. The Stormbreakers were standing on the shore of the Kalapaki Beach on the eastern side of the island. Only a short distance away, the small town of Lehue was in peak tourist season. Very strangely, the town and beach was filled with thousands of people going about their day, yet none of them acknowledged the sudden appearance of 5 battered-looking warriors and a dead alien. Children continued playing in the water, adults compared surfboards, and no alarms were raised. Slowly and cautiously, the Stormbreakers started to move off the beach and into the town. They had no idea where they were going, only that they felt a powerful compulsion to move forward. Just as her paws left the beach and stepped onto hot asphalt, Corder looked around to try and see the doorway from the death chamber. There was none. It was simply gone. "What kind of prison is this?" Kingi breathed. "If it really is a telepathic prison, then perhaps it was made specifically for the prisoner we're looking for," Maui said. "And how are we going to find him in a place as crowded as this?" Corder said. "There are thousands of people here." Varian stepped out onto the main street of Lehue and saw a vast crowd of people. For the first time, it was just too crowded to walk without bumping into someone. For just a moment, Varian was worried she, or he, was going to be bowled over and trampled by the horde of people. But, to their great surprise, the citizens of Lehue simply passed through Varian as though they were made of smoke. "That's the key," Varian said. "We're like ghosts in this world. Or in this mindscape, I guess. We just have to find someone who can see us. That'll probably end up being the prisoner Hayat is after." The team fanned out and started to search. They quickly discovered that not only were they in a different place, they had also managed to land in a completely different time. Peacekeepers of the long-defunct Advent Coalition roamed the streets, while in a public park, a police van was broadcasting a pre-recorded speech through its loudspeaker. "We must never allow these insurgents to fill our hearts with fear. These criminals and traitors seek to destroy all that we have built, to return us to the chaos of the old world. Only together can we oppose them. United in the Elders' love for us, we shall prevail, no matter the cost. Your loyal Advent peacekeepers will stop at nothing to prevent further attacks by criminal elements such as the one that occurred today. The Elders have total faith in our ability to overcome any and all threats to our peace. So remember, fellow citizens, only together can we build a better tomorrow. Long live Advent! Long live the Elders! Kingi snorted in disgust. Okay, so this is what Hawaii was like during the Second Hyperspace War 50 years ago, he said. Do we know anyone who was alive at the time, or is old enough to remember this? Trading theories and ideas, the team pressed on. Soon they came to an alleyway, where a gap existed between two large buildings. They were planning to regroup and brainstorm a new search pattern. Also, Varian needed to give someone else a turn carrying Nainu's body. His corpse was starting to get stiff. But before anyone could speak, Quarter's tail suddenly twitched. Her ears went flat, and her eyes narrowed into slits. "What is it?" Maui asked. Quarter very slowly nodded towards something just over Varian's shoulder. "That girl can see us," Quarter hissed. Very slowly, everyone turned around to look. A human girl, possibly 9 or 10 years old, was sitting cross-legged in the alleyway. Everything about this human was dirty and worn. She was clearly homeless. She wore a bright yellow t-shirt that was several sizes too big for her, meaning it looked a little like a ragged dress on her. The girl's blue jeans were faded and torn, and her toes stuck out of her shoes. The girl had brown skin that suggested African ancestry, but her round face and straight hair seemed to be more Asian than anything else. The homeless child was carrying a cardboard sign. It displayed a message written in very poor English. "We'll do anything for food." The homeless girl was staring at the Stormbreakers, slack-jawed. Varian started to speak, but before they could get a single word out, the small child yelped in fright, sprang to her feet, and ran away. The Stormbreakers hesitated. "Is that the prisoner?" Quarter said. "Another gifted child like Cassandra?" The team gave chase, following the girl out of the alley and onto the main street. They were expecting her to have a head start on them, but the scene waiting for them was far worse. As soon as the homeless girl ran onto the main boulevard, every single person in sight turned to look at her. Hundreds of people stopped what they were doing to react to her sudden appearance. Before the Stormbreakers could do anything, the crowd of shoppers, tourists, and business people rapidly transformed into an angry mob. "It's her!" a woman cried out. "The freak is back!" a man yelled. The little girl, terrified, crouched down on the ground and covered her head. A moment later, the mob descended upon her with violence. All 5 Stormbreakers screamed as the girl was punched and kicked by the first people to reach her. The homeless child fell onto her side, wailing as dozens of men and women started to stomp and kick every part of her body they could reach. "Stop them!" Varian yelled. The Stormbreakers drew their weapons and without hesitation opened fire on the crowd. To their dismay, the laser bolts simply passed through the angry mob as though they were simply holograms. Desperate, the team lunged forward to try and grab the girl instead. However, as soon as they reached her, the Stormbreakers fell forward into a gaping abyss that suddenly opened up in the ground before them. The team opened their eyes. The violence and action had stopped as suddenly as it started. They were now standing on a grassy hilltop, overlooking a rocky shoreline. According to Varian, it was the same island, just a different region. "More telepathic trickery," Setla said. This time, it was Maui who spotted the prisoner. "There she is," he called out. A great distance away, they spotted a girl sitting alone on the hillside. They could tell it was the prisoner because she was wearing the same yellow t-shirt as earlier, but for some reason, she looked older. Varian assumed she was now 11 years old. The girl twirled cheerfully on the spot, and a wave of psionic energy exploded out of her. Purple light swept across the hillside, and wherever it struck, flowers began to bloom. Soon, the entire ridgeline was ablaze with color as vibrant red, blue, and yellow blossoms were coaxed into revealing themselves. The Stormbreakers barely had any time to appreciate this display of psionic power before something terrible happened. With a deep rumbling sound, several Advent transport ships appeared over the horizon. The homeless girl screamed and started to run away, but a gigantic purple alien leapt from one of the ships and crashed to the ground in front of her. The poor child only came up to the chosen warlock's knees. She looked up at Khan Mon de Surik, her face full of horror. "You have told us how to find your mother, little one," the chosen warlock said. "We are grateful. Now be a good girl and wait here while we take away everyone you ever loved." Quarter lost her composure. "Run, kid!" she shrieked. "Run!" Once more, a seemingly bottomless pit appeared beneath the Stormbreakers, and they fell out of the scene and into darkness. Kingi nearly lost his grip on Nainu's body, but just managed to hold on as they landed in yet another scene. The Stormbreakers were on the same island, but in a third location. This time, the action had already started, and there was even less time to familiarize themselves with the surroundings. The homeless girl was a teenager now, and she was being accosted by 3 teens older than her. A boy and a girl were pinning her hands behind her back, while another boy was forcing the homeless girl to kiss him against her will. Squirming and resisting, she bit her attacker and shouted, "Get away from me, Dwayne!" "You don't even know what you want," the offending boy retorted. "You can't even speak up for yourself if your life depended on it. If you're not taking orders from someone else, you're useless. That's how you've always been." This time, both Setla and Maui lunged forward to defend the homeless girl, and as soon as they attempted to intervene, the scene ended with the now predictable black portal to the next one. But as the Stormbreakers fell away, Varian could only feel a sense of shock. The name Dwayne had stirred something in them. A memory. The Stormbreakers appeared somewhere completely different. Varian had no idea where they were, but it was most certainly not the Hawaiian Islands. They were now in some kind of grassland, or maybe a steppe. It was hard to tell because all of the surrounding land was covered with snow and ice. They were on the outskirts of a small village. There were no permanent buildings here. Instead, tents and yurts lined the streets. Taking a few cautious steps through the snow, Varian could hear an argument coming from inside one of those tents. A woman and a man were shouting at each other. The Stormbreakers drew nearer until they could plainly hear what was being said. "Have you never heard the phrase, 'Don't kiss and tell,' Dwayne? We were both kids back then. Neither of us knew what we were doing, and now here you are, making people think we were like frickin' Helen and Paris. Did you ever stop to think I might not want to share my love life with half the goddamned planet?" the woman shouted. The man called Dwayne tried to say something, but the woman wasn't done scolding him yet. She carried on. "Look, you wanted to find me. There's nothing wrong with that. What is wrong is that you built a mostly fake cult of personality around me just to figure out where I am. What the hell were you thinking was going to happen when you found me anyway?" Well, Dwayne stammered. I guess you would, when you saw how many followers I got for you." "Let me get this straight." The woman sounded like she was running out of patience. "You convinced people to worship me, damn near build a fucking religion around me, just so I could get back together with you?" There was a dull smacking sound, followed by a shrill gasp. Dwayne had just slapped the woman across the face. "You think I did this?" he roared. "These people are here for you, for the blue-haired angel who will deliver our people from the elders, for Jericho." Varian, Corder, Kingi, Setla, and Maui all froze, struck dumb. They had heard the name. Slowly, inexorably, the gears started to turn in their heads. The dawning realization was so powerful that the team hardly noticed they were being sucked into yet another moment in time. But now, Varian and the others knew the truth. The lone prisoner of the Crystal Palace was Jericho. Not the mysterious phony who masqueraded around in a white cloak. This was the real girl who killed the gods, who liberated the Earth and saved the galaxy 50 years ago. "Chamber of Life. Now it makes sense," Maui said. "She's been imprisoned within her own life. She's being reforced to relive everything." "And her experiences are being twisted," Varian added. "I'm confident of that. My history books would have mentioned if our savior went through this much abuse. Hell, my grandparents would have said something." Another scene materialized around the Stormbreakers. Now that they knew the prisoner's identity, they could quickly figure out which moment in Jericho's life they were witnessing. It was the Second Battle of Pyongyang. Varian gawked at his grandparents, having never seen them looking so young and fit. Blake Robinson and Chihiro Tachibana fought together like a well-oiled machine, supporting each other flawlessly. And then Mira Mihaka, the Elder's chosen assassin, appeared from the shadows and assaulted the first generation of Stormbreakers before Jericho appeared to turn the tide. Just as the team witnessed before, the event did not play out according to the historical record. Mira defeated Jericho and grabbed the teen by her iconic blue hair. "Now you realize the truth," Mira hissed. "Everything you've done has only served to embolden the worst of your kind. The people you call your allies today will become the next enemy. The consequences of your ill-advised friendships and alliances. That is what lies ahead." Jericho's entire life played out around herself and the Stormbreakers, twisted and warped to make her miserable. Varian felt his or her heart sink as Blake and Chihiro turned against Jericho at every opportunity, blaming her for everything wrong with the world. All of the original Stormbreakers had something nasty to say about Jericho too, including a vile comment from her abusive ex-boyfriend Yutaka Yamamoto about how she was not worth the effort. Meanwhile, Varian and the others were trying to brainstorm a way to break Jericho out of what they assumed was a cycle. The team tried intervening in certain moments again, but this only resulted in Jericho running away into the next scene. Setla tried to simply leave, to storm out of the moment in time, but instead he triggered an early transition to the next one. As Jericho and the Stormbreakers fell into her day-long visit to the Galactic Council, Corder threw out her arms. "Wait a moment," she said. "Let's just wait this out. I have an idea." Corder's suggestion to wait was a painful one. For an unknowable length of time, the Stormbreakers had to simply stand and watch as Jericho was beaten and verbally abused by all of the people she knew to be her friends, comrades, and allies. Finally, they came to the crucial moment. The war in heaven. All 5 of the Stormbreakers had seen movies and documentaries about this, the most important battle in the history of the galaxy. But nothing compared to witnessing the great conflict through Jericho's eyes. The scale and scope of the fire, death, and destruction was beyond anything the Stormbreakers could comprehend. Varian struggled to understand how anyone had survived a battle that destroyed the rings of Saturn, shattered the Galilean worlds, permanently scarred the face of the moon, and left a silver ring of wreckage around Earth. The team watched in awe as Jericho, Blake, and Chihiro led the final desperate assault on the Trinity superweapon. The epic final battle against Akira Robinson and her Templars played out, and finally, Corder's patience paid off. Corder knew it was coming. Her 4 comrades knew it was coming. They were counting on finally being able to take some kind of action when it happened. Blake Robinson, Chihiro Tachibana, and Mira Mihaka clambered down a ladder to try and stop Akira from reaching the time core. Up above in the central chamber, Jericho struggled to pull the body of Dwayne Gardner out of the integration assembly. Even from up here, Jericho and the Stormbreakers could hear the confrontation playing out below as Blake and Chihiro confronted their daughter for the final time. Jericho, along with the Stormbreakers, paused to listen. "I don't think you've been hearing us, but now that I've got your attention, I'll say it again," Blake Robinson declared. "There will be no more time travel. No more cycles or resets. We want to make our own future. We want to live with our own choices and consequences. Whatever happens today, we're going to live with it. Understand? You are not going to make our future for us anymore." "Or what?" Akira hissed. "You'll destroy the time core?" "To stop you? Absolutely," Blake replied. "Right. Before you do that, maybe I should give you a lesson. Tell you precisely why I know for a fact that you would never do that, Blake," Akira hissed. "Time is a fundamental component of the universe. The time core, when used as a hyperspace core, lets you jump across vast reaches of time, so long as you're moving in the same direction as time itself. When you weaponize the core, like this, you can slow down time as much as you like, but you can't actually stop it. Time is inexorable and irreversible. It keeps the entire universe running like an engine." Up in the central chamber, Corder gestured to Jericho, who was paying close attention to Akira's speech and ignoring the Stormbreakers. "When time breaks, go for Jericho," Corder breathed. "Now imagine that someone takes a hammer and smashes that engine," Akira went on. "You better pray to God, or maybe Jericho, that you completely vaporize the time core, that it utterly ceases to exist in a single moment. Because if you don't, you're going to find out what happens when time itself breaks. Your past, present, and future will all exist at once. Minutes, seconds, and hours will fold up on one another, and every possible timeline will merge into one unholy mess. Imagine, Mom, your body being trapped between days, half of you getting older while the other half turns back into a child. Causality itself would be meaningless. You could kill me right now, and I'll walk into yesterday or tomorrow and avenge myself. Your future will be in the past, and the present a century ahead of you. Plans and memories would be the same thing. You'll never die. You'll never be born." Akira's speech was reaching its crescendo. The Stormbreakers braced themselves, ready for what was about to happen. Kingi took one optimistic look at Nainu's corpse slung over Setla's back. There was a pause. Mumbled voices came from down below, followed by a shriek, and the last words Akira Robinson was known to have said, "It's not your future, it's mine!" And just as Corder was expecting, time and space itself suddenly broke. Corder, Kingi, Varian, Setla, and Maui found themselves standing once more on the sandy beach of Kauai. But something was different. Gone were the sounds of wind and surf. The city was still and silent. Yet, the beach, the road, the city, and the jungle were beyond crowded. There were people here, crammed together by the tens of thousands. As far as the eye could see, there was an endless mass of people. There were humans and aliens here, with every sapient species that ever lived represented. Despite the incredible density of the crowd, the Stormbreakers were able to navigate with ease, moving down the beach towards Jericho. "Did you notice?" Kingi said. "Everyone is frozen in place. They're all like statues." There were easily millions of people in the area, yet nobody moved. It was like the Stormbreakers had broken into a still photograph, and in the center of it all, there was Jericho. She was no longer the girl or battle-weary teen who spent her youth enduring the nightmares of war, but a fully grown woman who looked completely and totally defeated. She walked slowly through the crowd of motionless people, staring into every face as she went by. As she did so, something curious happened. A voice, matching the frozen person she gazed at, cried out in tones of desperation. "Don't bring us back, please!" a Partogan pleaded. "We've lived already. Please don't make us live again," protested an elderly Levakian. Jericho's eyes filled with tears. She moved on. "My children have just learned to accept my death," a human said. "What will happen to them if I appeared alive only to vanish again?" "Shit, Jericho, I thought we were on the same team," grumbled an XCOM soldier. "You do this, and you'll resurrect the progeny along with us. Your followers might start a real cult, worse than whatever Dwayne was doing." Jericho was slowing down. The pleading from the statuesque figures was overwhelming her. A Skildari child said, "I hope you'll do the right thing, Jericho. I hope." "Let us rest, Jericho," a Higaran begged. "This is the wrong choice, girl," said a Vagar. "You do this, and you'll regret it for 50 years. "The dead are gone, Jericho," a Blorg chimed in. "We are gone. Don't give false hope to the galaxy. Don't destroy the living." "Please, I can't go back," said an Ashurian. "It would destroy my parents all over again." Jericho was crying now. She stopped walking and started sobbing into her hands. She fell to her knees and wailed, and the 4 remaining Stormbreakers very slowly gathered around her. Maui gently laid Nainu in the sand before kneeling next to Jericho. Slowly, Varian reached out and gently put their hand on Jericho's shoulder. She did not pull away. No portals appeared. The chase was over. Jericho sniffed and finally spoke to the Stormbreakers. "I keep coming here and playing it back, but it always ends the same." Varian felt their heart flutter. The girl who became a god sounded, well, ordinary. Setla shuffled forward and allowed Jericho to lean back on his massive flank. "It's all my fault," Jericho cried. "Hayat and her cult. The progeny. Etienne and his fucking Sol Invictus. This whole damn war is my fault. I had so many chances to stop all of this from happening, and I blew it." "Jericho," Corder breathed. "You're a hero. We owe you, well, everything. Quarter wrapped her tail gently around Jericho's middle, but Jericho looked away. You're wrong, Jericho said. I let Dwayne and Geist and Violet start up the Templar Order. Then I resurrected half the damn universe and gave everyone a toxic religion that revolves around my own species. I'm not a hero, I'm a coward. Worse than the Elders. You are a very brave woman, Kingi said, placing himself directly in front of Jericho. Braver than any of us. It doesn't matter. Jericho looked down at the sand. I won the war, but none of you have peace. And it's all because of me. I'm so sorry. Varian and Maui, moving with great care, gently set Nainu's body in the sand, just in front of Jericho. She looked at Nainu's cold body, and she seemed to break down completely. Weeping and sobbing uncontrollably, Jericho brushed Nainu's face with her hand, as though wiping away a tear. This was our friend, Nainu Dokunle, Maui said. He grew up on a beautiful world very far from here. He had a home and a family because of you, Varian continued. Although he never met you, he loved you. The galaxy he lived in was not perfect, Quarter admitted, by any stretch of the imagination. But Nainu worked his little tail off, trying to make it better. He was a little like you, Kingi said, ready to sacrifice himself for something so much bigger. And in the end, he followed through. We would not be here now without Nainu. If Nainu were alive, he would have been grateful for the galaxy you left for him. Flaws and all, Setla finished. Nainu Dokunle would forgive you. Jericho picked up Nainu's body and cradled him in her arms. Still crying, she wordlessly embraced him. Then, for the first time since arriving on the scene, Varian and the others felt a gust of wind. Quarter looked around, alarmed to see that the island, the sea, and the sky were all starting to lose their color. At the same time, Nainu's body seemed to be glowing faintly, as though a light had been turned on somewhere inside of him. All 5 of the Stormbreakers looked around in a panic. The world was quickly fading away, becoming foggy and ill-defined. But Jericho's voice caught their attention. Sorry, can't help your friend and hold this place up at the same time. All 5 of the Stormbreakers started to exclaim, but they never got the chance to utter a word. At that very moment, the Crystal Palace collapsed. The transition from Jericho's mindscape into the real world was sudden and jarring. For Varian and the others, it felt like being dropped through a glass floor, only for it to shatter and the fall continued. Varian's feet hit solid ground and she, or he, collapsed. The noises around told Varian the others had failed to stick the landing as well. Varian gingerly got onto their knees and sat upright. They were once again on the shores of the island in Oregon. The surrounding lake was undisturbed, and the moon was still in its place, as though no time had passed at all. Is everyone okay? Varian called out. Sound off! One by one, the Stormbreakers replied. As Varian's eyes adjusted to the darkness, they realized the Crystal Palace was gone, and nothing remained to show it had ever been there. There was no wreckage or debris, not even a hole in the ground. It was like the structure never existed in the first place. And there was Jericho. Her yellow dress made her stand out in the darkness quite plainly. She was still holding Nainu in her arms like a newborn baby, and as she stood up, Varian saw Nainu's tail curl. Quarter, Nainu mumbled. What happened to your fur? Varian's heart leapt. Quarter actually did leap. The Stormbreakers descended upon Nainu, cheerfully welcoming him back to the land of the living and asking Jericho how she had done it. Not the first time, remember? Jericho muttered. It's just different when there's actually, you know. Nainu tried to jump down from Jericho's arms, but found he was still very weak. Jericho gently placed him onto Setla's shoulders. I cannot apologize to you enough, Nainu, Jericho told him. I was really hoping you would turn back at the death chamber. No one was supposed to volunteer for that. Next time, write it on the wall or something, Nainu said. I was ready to become one with my homeworld in there. Jericho winced, then turned to Varian. All right then, she said. I'm confident I know who you are, but why don't you tell me anyway? Varian started to introduce the Stormbreakers to Jericho, but he, or she, was interrupted by a shout. I'll tell you who they are! Heathens trying to abduct you! Against all odds, Erin Hyatt somehow survived the collapse of the Crystal Palace. Her acolytes were nowhere to be seen, and as she staggered toward the Stormbreakers, she raised a magnetic pistol, aiming directly at Varian. Jericho took one look at Hyatt and recognized her instantly. 50 years ago, Jericho and Hyatt fought side by side in the battle for Earth, and all these decades later, they could still recognize one another on sight. Hyatt looked at Jericho and addressed her in a lofty voice. Oh, great beast slayer! These Xenos are part of a campaign to subjugate this world a second time. I will take you back to the safety of my people in the Cathedral of Jericho. Your devoted servants await. Then Hyatt pointed her pistol at Varian's head and pulled the trigger. Varian's heart skipped a beat. He, or she, could see the ferrous slug hovering in midair about 2 feet away from their face. It was frozen, much like the people in Jericho's mindscape. Varian blinked and saw Jericho. She had her left arm outstretched and was pinching an invisible object in between her fingers. Then the Stormbreakers realized together she had caught the round using telekinesis. Jericho opened her hand and the bullet fell harmlessly to the ground. Hyatt tried to move, but it was too late. Jericho closed her fist again, and this time all 6 of the Stormbreakers could feel the telekinetic force pressing down on the cult leader, pinning her hands to her sides. Hyatt squirmed and tried to free herself, but all she managed to do was fire her gun a second time, sending a round flying high over Setla's head. I remember you, Jericho said, her voice icy. I know your cult and what you've done in my name. Jericho took a step towards Hyatt. You've terrorized the galaxy, abducted countless children. Jericho grabbed Hyatt by the front of her robes, indoctrinated your victims, and corrupted my words and actions. Jericho force-marched Hyatt to a nearby outcropping of large rocks partway up the volcanic cinder cone. Turned my people against their friends and allies, and helped my enemies take over the earth. Jericho grabbed Hyatt with both hands. The cult leader pleaded, Wait! Stop! But Jericho was done. I have had enough of you! She yelled. And with superhuman strength, Jericho threw Hyatt off the mountainside. Screaming and tumbling through the air, Erin Hyatt cleared the island and sailed on for another 100 feet before crashing hard into the surface of the crater lake below. The dark waters churned and frothed for a moment, and slowly became still once again. Panting, Jericho fell to her knees. The 6 Stormbreakers gathered around her and put their hands on her shoulders. She looked to her right and found Nainu staring back. The little lizard was very weak, and his limbs were shaking. He took Jericho's hand in his own and said, "Please, everything you worked so hard to give us is in danger. The paradox lives, and her allies are numerous. Will you help us?" Jericho looked down at the lake, hesitating. Nainu tightened his grip. "I promise you, on my honor as a Stormbreaker, you will not be asked to resurrect anyone." Jericho leaned over Nainu and gave him a hug. "All right then, let's go." July 1st, 2086. Cape Canaveral, Florida. It was time to leave. Piper Russell and her companion, Corsair the Faceless, looked out of the window one last time. They had planned out their escape for the past 24 hours. Knowing they would almost certainly never get an opportunity to enter the Cape again, the two had agreed to steal technologies, documents, and anything else of value they were able to actually transport off-site. In the absence of Grey Phoenix teams, the heist was executed slowly and quietly. A military cargo truck was parked between a pair of trees next to the Apollo Center, partially hiding it from view. Since Scarlett Freeman and Inez Espinosa were both in space, the Apollo Center was deserted. With their truck in position, Piper and Corsair stripped the place. An actual burglary, while carried out slow and quiet, was a sloppy job. The building was trashed by the 2 thieves, as computers were pulled out of their nooks and experimental weapons dismantled. The workshop was too big to be completely dismantled, so Piper and Corsair had to make some choices about which items to steal and which to destroy. Corsair was just bringing the thermite explosives downstairs when Piper found something very interesting. It was a holographic design studio, the type engineers use to plan out a new invention before physically constructing one. Corsair bypassed the fingerprint sensor by shapeshifting into Scarlett Freeman herself. Then the two searched for Scarlett's secret, off-the-books personal project. It took Corsair and Piper about an hour to find it. When they did, Corsair was deeply confused and had no idea what he was looking at. Piper, however, stared at the design schematics, then read the descriptions of what each component did. Then a look of realization dawned on her face, and she burst into hysterical laughter. "I don't believe it!" Piper gasped. "The whole time! The whole freaking time!" Then Piper ran up and down the rows of workshop projects, searching for Scarlett's secret project. When she found it, Piper picked up the device and yelled, "It's real! Holy Mother of Jericho! Freeman actually made this thing!" And Piper instantly called an end to the burglary. About 15 minutes later, the other 3 Wolverines arrived in Titusville. Jay, Lawrence, and Sarah had been warned in advance that Piper and Corsair were going to stage a noisy exit from Canaveral and that they would need help. The city of Titusville was swarming with UN soldiers and Shrike mercenaries. Today, however, it was also crawling with American resistance fighters. Sarah clambered out of Lawrence's truck and bolted down to the riverbank. She raised a set of binoculars to her eyes and kept a sharp lookout for any sign of activity from the Kennedy Space Center. She did not have to wait long. From across the Indian River, Sarah heard the sound of sirens, followed swiftly by a rising column of black smoke coming from the Apollo Center. The black smoke was the signal. Throughout the city of Titusville, sharp cracks rang out as American snipers opened fire on both the UN and Shrike troops. The occupation forces redeployed to engage the guerrillas, leaving the NASA Causeway Bridge undefended. With tires squealing, an armored truck raced across the bridge and back onto the mainland, pursued by an electric motorcycle. Sarah quickly ran back to Lawrence's truck and threw herself into the bed. "Go!" she yelled. Lawrence slammed on the accelerator and gave chase. Piper and Corsair pushed their truck to its limits, speeding right through Titusville and into the countryside. A Shrike mercenary was chasing them on a motorcycle. Using a submachine gun, he tried to shoot out the back of the truck, spraying the highway with Gauss slugs. In the passenger seat, Jay leaned out the window and started taking pot shots with his laser pistol. Sarah stood up in the bed and opened fire with her own weapon, a stutter mag. Both shooters found their mark. The motorcycle swerved dangerously and spilled its rider onto the side of the road. As the Shrike mercenary was left behind, Sarah, Lawrence, and Jay all cheered in triumph. Corsair and Piper did not stop their truck until they got all the way back to Orlando. Pulling into the gray Phoenix base, Piper stumbled out of the cab and started making her way to the back door, giggling incoherently the whole way. "You guys," Piper wheezed, "you're never going to believe this! Look at what we found in the Divine Atelier!" Lawrence, Jay, and Sarah called out to their allies to gather around. General Osmer, Colonel Sharp, Professor Espinosa, Shipbreaker Carfu, and Crew Chief Magra joined the Wolverines to see what had Piper so excited. "What is it?" Colonel Sharp asked. "This better be worth all the trouble you caused for it," Lawrence added. Piper grabbed two metal objects that were connected to each other via thick electrical cables. One was a cuff meant to be worn on the wrist, while the other was some kind of backpack. An Illyrium power cell could be seen emitting green light on the outside of the pack. Crew Chief Marga grumbled. "And what is this thing exactly?" Unfazed, Piper donned the backpack and tightened straps. Then she attached the cuff to her own wrist. With the two pieces of gear in place, Piper pressed a button on the cuff. 6 tiny hologram emitters came to life, 2 on the backpack and 4 on the cuff. As the illusion started to take shape, Piper did a dramatic flourish and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce you to the False Jericho."